very early in the morning, so thank you for coming here. And it's always wonderful to be here at JLF. So I wanted to start with actually the idea of what it is, Agla Varka. So I think, we're all Punjabis.
There are some foreign, so say next page.
No, I'm talking about us on the dais, on the dais, okay? So so three of us, I think that there was a certain disconnect between the Punjab that we grew up with. Ambassador Sarna writes about in all his books, it's sort of an imagined Punjab. It's a Punjab that he inherits, and it is a Punjab that he carries in his heart. It's not necessarily the Punjab that's reflected. And you also write beautifully about, this idea of Punjab that you inherited, this land of five rivers, no longer five rivers anymore. So the idea of Punjab itself, the word itself is dysfunctional because we're no longer the land of five rivers. It's divided. We're no longer the green state that it was. There is cancer. There are stereotypes about drugs and terrorism. And at Agla Varka, we felt as a journalist. So let me start with a story. Really, my grandfather was a good Punjabi, and his grandma and his mother was a Sikh. She was a very staunch thing, but every Thursday there was a Peer there was a Peer Sahib's grave outside his house in Sialkot, and every Thursday she would go out and she would go and light a lamp, and it's a story that we've all inherited of this Sikh woman who sort of, and one part of my grandfather's family is sort of Sikh and the other side is Hindu. But it's this intermingling of Punjab where you can be various things, where there is a certain commonality, where there is a lived history. And every time as a journalist, I would read about Punjab. It wasn't the Punjab that I inherited. It wasn't the Punjab of Bulle Shah. It wasn't the Punjab of Waris Shah. It wasn't the Punjab that we'd sort of seen around. And I think it's important for Punjab to be able to tell its own stories. And which is why we started Agla Varka, to sort of use culture as a lens to talk about the other aspects of Punjab, the aspects that go beyond the Patiala peg and the chicken leg. And I think that was why we're here. And I wanted to start really with, what's something that Malvika wrote in her book. And she said, too little history is as much a problem as too much of it. And in many ways, if you look at what you will see, if you go out to the bookshop at the moment, you will see lots of Ambassador Sarna's book, you will see Malvika's book, but you won't see very many popular histories of Punjab. This is the moment of South Indian history, but you don't have the same in this. Can we talk a little bit about too much or too little history of Punjab?
So actually, when I said too much history over there is as bad as too little, I meant in terms of the phrase in that context was cultures and customs that often weigh you down. And that, too much of that is oppressive, just as no backstory at all. So it was in that context that I had mentioned on the issue of history of families, right? But histories of Punjab, yes, you're right, it's not even taught as a separate subject, but then, it's everything that we are taught in school, for example, is very North Delhi-centric, Gangetic belt-centric. So you do have now histories which are emerging, writers like Manu Pillai who are writing and so on. Navtej is writing of the culture of Punjab and the stories of Punjab. My book didn't start out as a history. It didn't even try to be that. It basically was, it's received history when I was processing the grief of my father's very sudden demise. So when I began writing and unpacking what I knew of him or thought of him and my relationship with him, I realized that take away the Sikhism. He was not overtly religious, but I've realized that it was a true essence. And he was the lived experience of a Punjab experience, as also the partition experience. So that's how the book then unfolded, as is my mother's story. So to that extent, mine is not history, it's received history. And there might even be inaccuracies, but they are authentic to me because it's what I received. So, and I've been true to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mandira. I think both things are true about Punjab. There is too much history, along with the fact that there is too little history. And I would like to say there is too little history that is told. Well, there is a lot of history which is Punjab's history.
Yeah.
Not enough is told. So it does not transform into actual history for all of us. If I can just, I don't think we can expect that Punjab history will be taught in schools as a separate subject. But what I would like is that we tell more as people from Punjab, or even people who are not Punjabis should come to Punjab and write about Punjab's history, because it is an incredibly rich and layered history. If you even just go back 550 years ago to the sort of birth of Sikhism, and just before that, the rise of the Bhakti movement and the rise of the Sufis in Punjab, I think you find a huge mosaic of political history, spiritual history, cultural history, literary history, and then Punjab, because Punjab lay in the way of every invader who came to India.
Yeah.
And thereby, history is born out of clashes.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening. So every invader who came has left his impress on Punjab, and there is a history to that. That is the land where Sikhism was born. So you have that entire history. Then you had the fact that the British were inordinately fond of Punjab for good reason, because it was a rich place. They developed the canal colonies, and they also built up the Sikhs as a martial race. Now, many people believe this is an artificial construct. There are many Sikhs like me who would be the last people to go into the battlefield if they had a choice.
Well, diplomacy is in some ways preventative.
Yeah, that's a nice battlefield.
Yeah.
But, cocktail parties.
Yes.
And all that. Yeah.
Vodka-fueled packages.
Yeah. But then you have that entire construct of the Sikh Raj or the Punjab Raj, the Ranjit Singh's Raj. Even that history, when I started working on my book on Maharaja Dalip Singh about 20 odd years ago, I found that there were only 2 books on him. And both were written by 1.5 foreigners.
Yeah.
I say because one was completely by a British journalist, the other one was co-authored by an Indian and a British writer. So there was nothing. Even the respected Khushwant Singh had dismissed Dalip Singh off in a couple of small paragraphs and footnotes. So everything was written by the outside.
Yeah.
So then, I come back again and again to that famous Chinua Achebe saying that until the lions tell their own story, the hunters will tell the story. And the hunters were telling our story. And same about partition and thereafter. So I think there is a huge swathe of unexplored material, unexplored angles. And hopefully, by and by, more and more people will write it.
So I wanted to talk about this aspect of partition. So I think at some point of time, of course, 47 changes Punjab completely. It creates India, but it creates a border. So Punjab goes from being the center of, from this crossroad of culture to suddenly becoming a border state. Over the years, this border has loomed larger than larger over all our histories. At the moment now, for example, there is a certain peripherization even within the stereotypes of the same. If you look at how Punjab is perceived in popular culture, for example, there is either Urta Punjab or there is Chamkila. Okay, and even today, if you're trying to go, for example, between 47 to about 60, Punjab is not only halved, but it's also trifurcated. So even now today, when you go past, if you're in Delhi and you're trying to go towards Punjab, there is the Shambhu border, the division between Haryana and Punjab, which still you can never go, because there is this idea that there is concrete, there is still blockade. So there is a certain idea of Punjab being a border state, which is sort of becoming, which exists. But the reconciliation with partition, the fact that a lot of what Punjab's history was, whether it's Nanak, his birth, and his and Kartarpur, where he tills and where he sort of creates this experiment where he does the langar, it all happens the other side of the border. The fact that, Bulle Shah, all the stuff that geographically happens across the border. There is this very famous story about Heer, when she's invoked in about in the 1940s by this Punjabi poet, she goes to Jinnah and she says, you've divided Punjab, but what about me? Where do I go? How do you divide me? So can you really talk about how much of that partition actually changes the way we look at it? And maybe is that why we have not been able to write the histories that have been?
Right. So, the reason why I've even called it Unpartitioned Time is because there is a Punjab which transcends the borders.
Yeah.
So even if you say that it's not the land of 5 rivers anymore, I say it is. Because culturally, even if you cross the border and go into Lahore, the Punjabi that I speak and hear spoken there, I'm more familiar with than what is spoken certainly in Delhi, but even in Amritsar or Jalandhar.
Yeah.
Because that's where my family is from, and it sounds familiar to me. The songs are the same. The friends from Pakistan that I have, that I meet elsewhere, we share the same songs. We share the same marriage rituals. Recently, a friend got married in Lahore. I sent her a pulkari from here. She was familiar with the idea of a pulkari. So Punjab remains, and that is the resilience of the language, the songs, the culture, the food is familiar whichever side you go. So to that extent, frankly, the air, which I've mentioned in the book, you can't. The farming is the same.
Yeah.
I've described the wheat fields, the walking across. You'll notice the difference in the sense that there will be less tractors that side. I noticed that. But otherwise, I see it as a sameness. So Haryana, interestingly, I find that to be more of a drastic divide, because suddenly, considering that it was Punjab and yet there was Punjabi spoken with this particular separate lilt, now the language seems, do you agree with me? It seems completely different. I'm not saying that it's become different because of that, but suddenly the border seems to have identified it separately as a Haryanvi. And I am born in Haryana, in Karnal. And I continue to call myself Punjab, Sikh, and all those things. So it's not borders as only one part of the story. There's something deeper and wider which will take us in further down. And that is the cultural roots, which are very, very deep. And as Navtej has said, it's a history that is rich with many stories which are there, waiting to be told, but are already being told locally in the form of, whatever the folk stories are, the folk songs are, the Dula Pathiwala on Lodi. We all celebrate Lodi, but nobody really remembers the story of Dula Pathiwala any longer. But it's there. These are. But I frankly think that's true of all cultures.
Do
That's true of all cultures, but yes, we are talking of Punjab, which has been disturbed and is fraught politically. And it is looking to survive, and it is, because of these deeper connects.
Well, I wouldn't underplay the impact of partition.
Yeah.
So we are left with two different dimensions. We are left with one dimension is our Sanja Punjab, as we call it, the commonalities of Punjab. Malvika has referred to, the language, the culture, the history. That is a given.
Yeah.
That we had a divided Germany for, 40 odd years. That didn't change the German language or the German cultural inheritance. It put a political color on it. And that's exactly what has happened here. That, you have become Indian Punjab and Pakistani Punjab, whether you like it or not. I want to go back to where my father came from. I'd have to go through several hoops to simply go back there if at all I could. Our entire, the well springs of our, spiritual, cultural life for people like Malvika, me and our families has been left behind.
Yeah.
So there is that tear. You cannot underplay it.
No.
You cannot underplay it. You cannot forget it. But it still doesn't mean that everything else has vanished.
Yeah.
But again, if come back to your thing of telling the story of Punjab, this division makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah.
I cannot go to the archives in Anarkali's tomb in Lahore and sit for as many weeks as I want. I cannot walk freely in the streets of Rawalpindi and get the taste. So whatever I have to do and write, like I wrote in my novel Crimson Spring, is deliberately written of an unpartitioned Punjab.
Yeah.
So not only was I trying to write the history of an unpartitioned Punjab in the beginning of the 20th century, I was trying to write the geography of that Punjab. So in that book, for instance, trains go straight from Jhelum to Amritsar.
Yeah.
So there is no dividing line, and that unfortunately is today a fact. So when you write the histories of Punjab, sooner or later the generations that come will have to factor in that division. I can still write about an undivided Punjab, but it will become increasingly more and more distant and more difficult. So people will then have to factor in that thing, which brings us to your question of what actually did partition do. It did this. Not only did it divide people from their heritage, it divided them from in a way from their future.
But so my question is that if you have to say summon up this idea of a present day Punjab, and we can't escape the problems of present day Punjab too. One of the aspects you talk about is, you said language, and I would like to talk a little bit about the aspect of language. Okay, one, if you look at all the other states, for example, there is a huge immigration problem in Punjab. Everybody, and it was also because of terrorism, people left, right? Villages on villages have sort of emptied out going across. But there was also a question of language, okay? The politics of language has been, ever since the language movement has existed in Punjab, where you choose, whether you choose Punjabi or you choose Hindi as your mother tongue. But there is also the fact of keeping Punjabi alive. And it is very much that also. If you look at all the other states, whether it's Bengali, whether it's Maharashtra, whether it is even Odia, where there's this great pride now, or everybody down south speaks it, but Punjabi over this thing has sort of withered away.
True.
Right? So it isn't only an Haryana, Punjabi problem, but it is also in this thing. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the history of losing language and how much of that is also losing identity?
I think a lot of that, certainly amongst the traditional English-speaking sort of elite, the Boxwala children, which again I've described in the book. I grew up speaking, reading, writing Punjabi because of growing up in a small town. But my friends, when I went to Welham, they would invariably, I would feel a little sorry for them because they would say, we understand, but we can't speak, because it was not spoken at home. And yet, I too am now guilty in the sense that my children understand, but they don't speak fluently, which I would have liked them. And I regret, because I tended, when they were small, to speak more in Hindi, which was a mistake. And now even they feel it, but it's something that you grow up with. It's a sense. So we were lucky, and my mother we spoke Punjabi at home because my mother was not fluent in English. So that was actually helped, and we would read the Guru Granth Sahib, so I knew how to read Gurmukhi and so on. So the next generation, indeed, but it's an upper class problem more. Then comes the immigration. I think that when they go abroad, family that I know, various rishtedars who've gone and so on, I find that they actually want to speak more Punjabi there because it's an assertion of identity in a lonely land. So
yeah, look at the music that's coming out.
They look to speaking more. Even the younger, my children's generation, who've born and brought up there, speak very good, fluent Punjabi for that reason. So it's a complex thing, really. Do
you want to talk about the last?
Yeah, I think language is a very important aspect of identity. And even in Punjab, there is, we say there is Punjabi.
Yeah.
But there are Punjabis and Punjabis. Yeah. I mean, there's the Malwai, there's the Majel, there is the Potwari. There are different Punjabis even within Punjab. And for instance, my grandmother used to speak, Potwari Punjabi, and there were words which we heard in our childhood which no longer are used anywhere, even in our own family. So, at some stage I wanted to make a list and leave that list that these were words and these meant so and so, because we have lost that usage. But again, that being a personal aspect, but I think in a broader sense, Punjabi will be retained if people read and write Punjabi, if people publish
in
Punjabi. Not that Punjabi publishers don't exist, but again, there are small publishers.
Yeah.
So you don't have major publishers who are willing to do Punjabi. If there are translations of English books into Punjabi more, and it is a question of sustaining the language. Unfortunately, with the trifurcation of Punjab, you have half the Punjab said that Hindi is my mother language, mother tongue, and so you had what you had. So you cannot regain that ever again. But again, I think we have to, people like Mandira, your Agla Varka,
yes.
and these platforms, if you do sessions on Punjabi, if you tell people the richness of the Punjabi literature, the Punjabi script. I mean, you keep mentioning Bulle Shah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was also, this is...
there was Batalvi.
Inherited. This is Baba Farid wrote in Punjabi.
Yeah.
Today you mention Baba Farid, everybody will think he wrote in Urdu.
Yes, that's true.
But the fact is that he wrote in Punjabi. So, there is a huge amount of literature, language, which is extremely rich, which needs to be brought out, which needs to be talked about. People need to again rekindle their pride in being Punjabi, in speaking Punjabi without hesitation, and not only using Punjabi as a contribution to Bollywood, usually for bad words.
Yes, which is true. Yeah. But I think that is, if you talk about that, because if you look at, for example, when we've done programs, the first program that we did, which was about to mark 40 years since it was of 84, it was a day where there was a cricket match. It was the final of the T20 cricket match. It was in GK2 in Kunsum, and the room was supposed to be about 80 people, and it filled 200. Everybody came in with a map. Everybody was sort of hit this thing and looked for at Agla Varka. So there is I mean, if you look at it, the number of people who register, for example, Agla Varka, it isn't only about Punjabi. Well, there is an aspect of Punjabi within the thing, but there is also, we move between languages. And I think it's important to remember that there is plenty of people who want a different idea of Punjab, who actually have the same idea, but they do not have access to it because the only thing that they have is boxed out Bollywood aspects of it. And I wanted to ask you really about that, about the fact that we have not been able to tell the contribution of Punjab also.
Well, we haven't talked about the contribution of Punjab. I'm afraid Punjab today has been sunk into a sea of stereotypes.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about the Patiala peg and the chicken leg.
Yeah.
It's more than that. I mean, Punjabis, the other day I was driving my own car and I reached a hotel porch and my wife got off from the other side and I was trying to attract the attention of the valet to take my car and he wouldn't come. Because he thought I was actually the car driver. So I told him, I ultimately, I couldn't help it. I said, listen, all Sikhs are not taxi drivers. So he was embarrassed enough to say that some of them are even prime ministers.
Yes.
So I thought it was a good exchange. It was an educative exchange. Yeah. But it just shows us how much we have become victims of stereotypes, not just the Sikhs, but of Punjabis. And we sometimes encourage it ourselves.
I think we bought into it.
I'm sorry to say, we encourage it ourselves. So, but, somewhere we have to let the stereotypes carry on. People who can laugh at themselves are very courageous people. So I have no problem with telling Punjabi or Sikh jokes all the time. But I think our contribution needs to be remembered. Our contribution, forget about history, our contribution to recent Indian history.
Yeah. That goes beyond just the Prime Minister.
Our contribution, which should not be restricted only to the wars, which was huge. To the First World War, to the Second World War. We had an inordinate amount of recruitment
in the armed forces even now.
And then in independent India's contribution in different fields, again, it would be a stereotype to say that it's only the military. It is not only the military, that's an important aspect. And you talked of agriculture.
Yeah.
Agriculture, Punjab is the granary basket. Punjab was the lab for the green revolution, which we are suffering the results of now.
Yeah.
There is a descending water table. There is bad water. 25% of Punjab today the water is not worth consuming. And another 25% is barely worth consuming. But the fact is that for the first 25 years of this century, Punjab was contributing with about 1.4% of the land. It was contributing 60% of India's rice.
Yeah.
Today it's come down to about 30%, but it was 60%. The land needs to be re-nourished, the land. So there are many stereotypes. They are not, Sikhs and Punjabis are not all farmers. They are not all soldiers. They are not all Bhangra dancers. There are other things. So they're
not all taxi drivers.
I know people are doing a lot of work on that, and I think that should be encouraged.
A typical one, in fact, which is that Punjab has no culture, only agriculture. I get very riled with that, but it is quite commonly said as well.
Yeah, but I wanted to
particularly from Bengal.
Yeah, because
we don't want to start a war here.
Yes. I mean, there's already a war about Rasgulla in Bengal and Odisha, but I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk a little bit about farming. Your father was a farmer, and I wanted to bring this up because one of the borders and the perceptions that have been created, especially with the farmer agitation, is the idea of the rich farmer, right? And I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's no such thing as a rich farmer. And my life, I mean, that's also part of it. We lived in perpetual debt. And that was really the joke even in the family because we were dependent on the local money lender. And it was always, so the joke about my father was that he doesn't live beyond his means, he lives before his means. So the person, you know, the wheat and the rice, even before it was sold, he'd have gathered the money from the aarti to say, go and see my crop, kitne paise bhejoge? He'd say itna, and he'd take it and it would be spent on, you know, on a lifestyle which, and that is the dissonance, the lifestyle that he knew in pre-partition was of wealth.
Yeah.
If I may say, the lifestyle from what I read of your grandfather was that he was taking 2 large whiskies,
Yes.
even from his Riles tube,
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
on
he
his
was.
last day.
Yes.
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 I admire him.
Yes. Too large. Yeah. So that's a stereotype, and he lived it. So to that extent, and he would drink his whiskey in the evening. There would be Begum Akhtar playing on the record player, and he would be doing his gutka, his part, simultaneously. So it was this comfortable relationship with prayer, with music, and his whiskey. But anyway, that was the lifestyle that was remembered from their Rajkot unpartitioned Punjab days. And then that is the memory they had to then revive and continue, because the drop in lifestyle did not cross their mind, which meant that they were in debt. So that's really, and then came the land ceiling. And I've written about the trauma of that, because that was extremely devastating for my father's sense of even self-worth. Because the truth is that he wouldn't have been able to do a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the debt part is very important. You know, the well-known economist in the early 20th century, Malcolm Darling, wrote about Punjab that Punjabis are born in debt, live in debt, and die in debt.
Yeah.
And this was part of the way the land holdings were, and the part of the, you know, the entire structure of the village economy was. The very strong hold of the money lender was very much present in Punjab. And it was not the Sikhs who were the money lenders. So the Sikhs, that is one of the reasons for the recruitment in the First World War. When Michael O'Dwyer began his recruitment drive, why were people coming up? Because they didn't have money. They were in debt, and they were being paid 11 rupees a month to go and fight in Mesopotamia and in the snows of France and Belgium. And for 11 rupees a month, they were happy to go and suffer those conditions because they needed to send some money back home. So debt has been something which has, as you know, impoverished the Punjab's economy for a long time. So there has to be a solution to this. I mean, if you talk about, I know you're probably running out of time, but you know, if you're talking about, if you even pick up 2 problems of Punjab today, it's debt and drugs.
Yeah.
Whether it is the debt of the individual or the debt of the state to the center. And then you have, this entire thing about what drugs are doing to Punjab. So we cannot talk of a glorious past and a glorious history and, you know, how nice we were, and we cannot be singing Bulle Shah's kafis when most of the people are stoned out.
Yeah.
You know, so I think
Or leaving.
or leaving or having left. You know,
Yeah.
When you travel through Punjab, the great educational advertisements that you see are for the English language course, which
Yeah.
will get you a Canadian / Australian / British visa.
Yeah.
So, you know, if that is your ultimate goal, then history will become real history.
So we're going to wind up, but I wanted to ask about one last question about turning the page. Okay? Do you think at this point of time, and I want you to talk a little bit about that, Ambassador Sarna, about the political aspect of Punjab and the fact that it is becoming very much at a border, and why it's important for Punjabis themselves to start talking and turning the page. It's on us.
It's on us because we are the ones. I mean, when I say we the Punjabis who vote and exercise our democratic rights. It depends on who we bring into power. What are we listening to? who are the people we are supporting, what are the issues, which are the parties which are going to address the issues. What is happening is it's, last time it was these guys, this time now we must bring in these guys. And in the end, everybody does the same thing. So I think it is entirely up to us to try and turn the page. And we need to turn the page in several things. I think the first thing will have to be political leadership. It has to be. Without political leadership, you're not going to get in any direction, whether it is education or it is agriculture, it is any of these things. So ultimately, it's again going to be the people who will have to do it. And the second aspect, I'm afraid, is education. Education is pretty good in Punjab. Enrollment levels are pretty high in Punjab. It's not that people are not studying, but then they see no future. So that will again depend upon the political leadership. So I'm afraid the page has to be turned, but I think it's not going to be easy.
Punjab during the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, in fact, had the highest literacy rate because at that time to read the Guru Granth Sahib, he had even circulated free Qaidas. So every house could read. So literacy has always been high. And that's just a side I'm saying. But yes, to turn the page, political leadership, but what is happening in the center is worryingly also happening in Punjab, which is the amalgamation of religion and politics, where you suddenly have the SGPC, asserting political power or trying to grab power in this Sikh-Hindu kind of divide, which is extremely dangerous and it is destructive, and that one has to distance from. Recently you had political leaders standing in front of the Akal Takht and saying, I am sorry, I did this and I have been corrupt and this, that and the other, and then told to, it's become a farce. So that separation must be there. And that too I've mentioned in the book, in fact, because my grand aunt had started as a Congress worker and set up this college called Mata Kujri College in Talania. But eventually it was taken over by the Akali party. And when she used to go and ask for chanda to raise funds, it used to always be, but this is Congress or she's communist, but we have to give to Babaji the party, which became Akali. So that is a very important aspect that needs to be considered.
It needs to be considered, but it's not going to be easy. Yeah. Because, this has been the tradition in Punjab. There has been this combination of the church and the state for a long while. I mean, people who have read Maharaja Ranjit Singh's history will recognize that, when he was criticized for having his, this Muslim courtesan, Moran, as his favorite concubine, and then his wife, he was actually sentenced to 40 lashes or some number of lashes, and he submitted himself. Yeah. And this is also there because the SGPC was born as part of the Akali movement for the Gurdwara reform movement. So they are sort of linked at the hip, and there needs to be modernized.
But we need to know that it is not Punjab. Punjab is not Sikhism.
It isn't.
So that's an important thing. We can't just...
Which is, So, also sparking off meaningful conversations, which I think it is, this thing where you talk about current problems and problems of history. Any questions? Oh my God, lots. Okay, start with, are there any women who want to ask any questions? No, but I do this each time, but no, the gentleman right in front. Yeah, there should be.
No women.
Okay, older gentleman.
Your mom can.
Oh, okay, older gentleman. No, this gentleman, then older gentleman. Okay.
Should I?
Gigi.
Sat Sri Akal ji.
Sat Sri Akal.
My question particularly to Navtej, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਅਗਲਾ ਵਰਕਾ ਤੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਅਨਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨਡ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੋਚ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਗਲੇ ਵਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਮਾਈ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਟੂ ਯੂ ਇਜ਼ that when I go, like you have been traveling extensively, I've also traveled across the world, the sort of warmth I have with Pakistanis from Punjab is like you can't, like it's something coming from inside. Jinne Lahore nahi vekhya aur jammya nahi, that sort of feeling I get. So can we have that sort of track to diplomacy or that sort of thing, bringing Punjab in picture so as to have common future ahead? Thank you.
Well, you know, the common future at the moment looks bleak to me. There is a very definite border. The relationship is virtually frozen. So unless the overall political relationship improves, you cannot talk culture. I mean, you can talk on Zoom, which people do, but you know that is not going to get you far. But if you're talking of common seminars or discussions or interaction or free travel, that needs a certain improvement in the fundamental relationship between the two countries, which at the moment is, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever depends on your point of view, is not there. So we can have a romance, but we can't have a real life relationship.
Thank you very much. My question is that you haven't touched upon the problem and the issue of Khalistan, which is very much a Punjab issue, probably more abroad than here. I'd like to hear something about it.
I think your question includes the answer. I would not agree with you that it is a Punjab issue. If there is an issue among some elements abroad, I don't think it's worth discussing on this platform.
The gentleman right at the back. Okay, you after this. Quick question.
Hello. Yeah. Sarna ji, I completely agree with your proposition that politics is broken. But it's not broken only in Punjab. So I stay in Bombay and I travel all over. Everywhere it's the same. This party or that party. And the choices are really bad, worse and worst. The only difference I see is that whereas Bombay, Bangalore, Pune, all these people have professionals moving into the city, unfortunately, there is not a single Punjabi city where professionals and the intelligentsia would want to move into. This is my perception, I may be wrong. So no one wants to go to Ludhiana and Jalandhar and work there and stuff like that. How does society improve if you don't have that class of people coming in? Because, you know, then, I mean...
Well, if I got the gist of your question is that there is a paucity of professionals from other parts of the country moving into Punjab, and that is very well true. In fact, the professionals in Punjab are leaving the state and going outside the country. So until you create the conditions, you create the infrastructure, and we go back to the political leadership, until you create the economic conditions, the industrial estates, bring in the big companies, how are professionals going to come in?
I want to supplement that a bit. In Unpartitioned, because I grew up in Karnal, which, yes, now with the trifurcation is not Punjab, but it's a typical small town. And my relationship with it was very complex because I loved it because it was home, and yet I couldn't bear to live in it beyond 10 days at a time. I would want to keep coming back to Delhi. So even at the book launch we had, I talked about the fraught relationship which we have with our hometowns, which are basically small towns in Punjab, Haryana, and so on. And there was one man in the audience who stood up and said, I so disagree with you. Karnal can be a destination. It has a 5-star hotel. It has nice movie halls. And, you know, he just put me in my place. But yes, I, as a professional, I couldn't think of practicing in Karnal, out of the question. Between Chandigarh and Delhi, obviously, as a woman, Delhi was the better place because the patriarchal, male-centric approach continues overwhelmingly in the traditional Punjabi cultural milieu. So there is all of that as well.